Hi, my name is Gordon Lim, and I'm the Director of the Social Work Program here at BYU. I'd like to welcome you to our online information session. Hopefully over the course of the next little while you'll be able to understand a little bit more about social work in general and about BYU's social work program in particular. I remember when I was an undergraduate student looking at graduate schools and things, I knew I needed to go on for graduate school, having just graduated with a degree in psychology. But I never knew anything about social work. I didn't know, what it was about. I thought it was a job title for CPS workers, and it wasn't until I had a friend talk to me about what he was going to do. He was going to go get a master's in social work, and so I said, "What is that?" And he started to tell me about all the different opportunities and options that social work presented, and really piqued my interest, and obviously got me down this path. And that's why I'm here today, is because of his help and his influence. So what we want to do for the next little bit is talk a little bit about social work in general, and then get into some of the things that makes social work unique, and then about our program. So as you can see, one of the goals we have at BYU is to be excellent in clinical social work and research. And so let me introduce you to some of the people that are going to be part of this information session, as well as people you might want to get to know if you're interested in this program. And so as you can see my picture there, Gordon Lim, and then another important person, Professor Ginny Roby, who is the chair of our admissions committee, and then Charlene Clark, our department secretary, and Nancy Schumpert, our graduate secretary, who will be talking a little bit about the application process a little bit later. Before I get into the employment projections, I wanted to just mention a couple things about that first slide that I had up there, talking about clinical social work. So one of the first things that makes BYU's program a little bit different and a little bit unique from all other, not all, but most other social work programs, is our emphasis. So when I got my master's degree, and this is common for most master's degree, you get to choose from 5 or 6 different specializations: criminal justice, gerontology, families and children, mental health. And then you take courses specific to that area in your second year. At BYU, we have one specialization, and that's clinical social work. So our goal is to give all of our students really good clinical training, and then the second piece there is to give them all good research and stats training so that you can be good consumers as well as evidence-based practitioners. And so that'll kind of come back as we talk a little bit more, but I think it's important to kind of set the stage with that information right up front. So one of the questions we often get asked is, is social work a profession that I can actually get a job in? And so on this next slide here, you'll see that as from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they're reporting that between 2010, and we're almost halfway through that period now in 2020, that social workers are expected to grow by 25%. There's a number of social workers that are getting ready to retire, and a number of great opportunities in social work. We were hit a little bit, as were most people, in the 2008 recession, but many of our students are now, right as they're graduating, having job opportunities, and that projection seems pretty consistent with what we're seeing as well. So a 25% increase. And not only replacing the baby boomers, but in growth in the human services and in social work. And this next slide is just another version of that. As you look at different types of social work areas, 26%, social work in general 25%, whereas all other occupations are expected to grow 14%. So if you look at social work compared to everybody else, almost a 11% increase over the general opportunities for all occupations. So another aspect is what makes social work a little bit unique. And I want to cover 2 aspects here. The first one is the way we view systems. So if you talk to psychologists, there are social psychologists, but oftentimes psychology focuses on the individual, the person. We call that kind of macro level work. Very important. And then you have kind of sociologists who kind of look at the community level and more macro stuff. Social work might be considered more meso. And we call that this ecological or systems perspective person and environment. And so one of the things I really love about social work is this model and how we look at people and we look at the different impacts or factors that impact their lives. So as you can see here in that the person is surrounded by family, then community, then the larger social environment. And social workers are to look at the different systems within that impact this individual. And so that's why you'll hear words like systems theory and person and environment when you talk to social workers and the different aspects that they take into account when working with families or an individual. And so for me, that really resonated with me as far as this approach that we take in social work to helping the clients and the people we work with. So that's the first aspect that is somewhat unique to social work. The second aspect is on this next slide. As you can see here, social work has values and missions. And when you look at the mission, I want to just kind of emphasize that bottom part here. Social work was founded to help poor and disenfranchised people. And so does that mean other professions or degrees don't do that? No, but that is something that is very unique and important in social work, helping vulnerable, oppressed, and those living in poverty. Now, I want to say something here that's very important as you consider social work. This is tough work. And so one of the aspects that we really encourage students to take advantage of is getting some experience in a social work type of environment. And what that does is if you're working with abused and neglected children or the chronically mentally ill or the homeless, you get to kind of see, is this what you want to do? This profession is not for everyone, but it's a very rewarding profession, but it is hard work. And so, as you think about what you want to get into, if you have not gotten some experience in these areas, it would be valuable for you to determine whether this is the profession for you or not. And then, what should resonate with you are these values if you're going to go into social work. Dignity and the worth of the person, service, integrity, importance of human relationships, competency, and social justice. Those are, the core values of what we do and what we are in social work. Now on to a couple of did you knows that a lot of people just go, wow, I did not know that about social work. One of the great things about getting into social work is working with a wide variety of clientele and a wide variety of areas. And so in social work, our terminal degree is the master's degree. Many other professions, you have to get a PhD to become a licensed counselor or whatever profession you're looking at to get licensure. It's often at the PhD level, but at social work, it's at the MSW level. So an MSW in 2 years, oftentimes 2 years post-master's practice, passing an exam, and you can become a licensed clinical social worker. So this next slide I think is very important as well. So did you know that licensed clinical social workers can be certified as marriage and family therapists, but the reverse is not possible? So one of the great things about social work is you have social workers working in marriage and family areas, but it's not reciprocal in the sense that marriage and family therapists cannot do everything that social workers can do. So one of the things I always tell students is if you want to do marriage and family therapy, you ought to be looking at the MFT degree because they're going to give you much more in-depth and better training in that particular area. But one of the things that draws people, they go, well, I'm not sure I want to do that particular piece for the rest of my life. I want to consider that. And so that's where social work's breadth really comes in. You have many options with a social work degree, and that's very appealing to many people. The next piece, the licensed clinical social workers can have a private practice while a PhD is required of all other therapeutic professions, as we mentioned. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about the importance or the value of a PhD in social work, but to do clinical practice, that occurs at the MSW or LCSW level. A couple of neat things about social work. Did you know that we're the nation's largest provider? 60% of all mental health services provided by social workers. The VA employs more social workers than any other degree. Utah's mental health and child welfare systems employ more social workers than any other degree. And so we could go on talking about LDS Family Services and other organizations that hire a lot of social workers. But this idea that, wherever there are people, you will find social workers. So, this next slide, as you look at schools, hospitals, prisons, the military, the justice system, everywhere where there are people, there are social workers. And then if you look at this next slide, all the different areas that social workers, and this isn't even exhaustive, but all the different areas that you can go into and specialize in as a social worker. So great options with working with various populations. So in my work, I began my master's degree thinking I wanted to work with troubled youth. I'd worked a little bit with Anasazi and some organizations that worked with troubled youth, and I said that might be a really good area. But as I got into my master's degree, I started working with an Indian professor, and he suggested we need help working with American Indian tribes. And so I started to shift my focus and became interested. I have some background with American Indians. My mother is part American Indian, and so that's what I do, is I research and work with American Indian tribes. And so just a great opportunity in the breadth of opportunities social work provides. A question we get oftentimes is, can you make a living with social work as a social worker with a social work degree? And so the first thing I'd say is if money is your primary motive, then there are other professions you might want to look at. But can you make a living wage with social work? And the answer is absolutely. So if you look here, this is 2010 statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The median average for social workers was $42,500. Oftentimes, what you'll see in social work is people working a full-time job, and then on top of that, they'll develop expertise in a particular area. Marriage and family therapy might be one, working with pornography, sexual addictions, anything. And then they'll develop a little bit of a private practice on the side where they can, supplement that income, work 1 or 2 nights a week to get the LCSW, be able to bill insurance companies, and that's where a lot of people make a good living wage. So that top 10% of more than 70,000, those are people that have developed good expertise in particular areas, and so absolutely you can make a living with a social work degree. So let me switch gears now a little bit. Hopefully you've got a little bit of an understanding of what social work is about. Now we want to talk about the School of Social Work at BYU and some of the unique and important aspects of our program. And so we find that there are really 3 reasons why students choose to come to BYU's MSW program. So the first is the strong emphasis on clinical social work and research with children and families. So there's 3 important components there. First is the clinical social work. As I mentioned before, that's our goal. We're going to give you really good clinical training skills. So let me just give you a couple of examples there. So when I started my master's program, and this is most social work programs, the day you start your MSW degree is the day you start your internship, which means you're working, doing therapy, working with individuals. Now, many students come in with minimal or not very good training in doing therapy and things. Obviously, you can't even do that at a bachelor's degree, and yet the day you start school is the day you start doing that type of therapy. When I came to BYU, I was blown away with the model we use. I taught at 2 other universities, and that was the model. And in fact, when I did my master's degree, I actually started doing my internship 3 weeks before I started school. So I was just going, oh, please, I hope I don't mess somebody's life up, because I didn't have the skill set yet. So in our program, we make you go through 2 semesters worth of coursework. You're introduced to clients through the comprehensive clinic, where you get 1 case, and then spring and summer you are in your first internship. So you can imagine a student doing their internship the day that they start the MSW program versus a student that has 2 semesters of coursework and training, as well as 1 case at the comprehensive clinic. You know, it's not fair to even compare because it's a different model, but students that go through the the BYU program are very well prepared to go into their internships. And you'll see one of the benefits that preparation has here in a little bit with our agencies. Then the other piece is we believe that all social workers need a good background in research and statistics, that you will be a much better social worker if you can know what evidence-based practice is, that you can know what the research says about a practice. And so that's where our strong emphasis on clinical social work and good research skills comes in, is being able to do evidence-based practice in your own work and understand evidence-based practice in other people's work. And then that focus of children and families is very important as well. The second reason is the ability to learn about social work in a gospel context. Obviously, that's part of who we are at BYU. We value and we uphold the values of BYU and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And so it's a very unique opportunity that we have as professors and students to talk about a very liberal profession that social work is, and then tie in the gospel context with that. For me, it's a very liberating to be able to talk about religion and spirituality, whereas in other places that I've taught, I haven't felt as comfortable bringing in the spiritual or the religious. And so the gospel context is a valuable piece of what we get to do here at BYU. The third is the exceptional financial aid package, and I'll get into that here in a minute, but what an incredible blessing we have here at BYU with the support from the church and with the support of our community agencies. So let me get into a couple things and then I'll come back to the financial aid. Did you know that out of 241 graduate and undergraduate programs at BYU, the School of Social Work is one of only 16 departments or schools that were ranked in the 2011 U.S. News and World Report. So that just is further evidence this is a good, solid program. Last year we went through our accreditation cycle for reaffirmation with CSWE, went through with flying colors, which is a tribute to our faculty and staff and students. And then we went through unit review, which is what BYU does internally every 7 years, and got glowing remarks there. So we are in really good shape as a program right now. A recent study, and this is good information for us, I don't know so much if it's good information for students, but a recent study found that BYU's social work program was the third most selective graduate program in the country. So it's a very competitive program to get into. We're going to give you an idea of how best to prepare for that as we go along here to get to be the best applicant you can. But it is a competitive program, which allows us to really get good students into this program. And then, as I mentioned a little bit before, LDS Family, we have a good relationship with LDS Family Services, and in the past, the school has been one of the main suppliers of LDS Family Service counselors. Okay, going back to that financial aid piece, we have kind of three areas, and you could almost say there's a fourth area of financial aid that are available to students as they come in. So if you look at this first slide, at this slide here, it says historically all MSW students have been offered a financial aid package between $10,000 to $20,000. So if you look, it's going to cost about $15,000 to pay for tuition at BYU. This means that for some students they may have to go into just a little bit of debt, but for a majority of students there is minimal to no debt involved with getting an MSW. And so part of that is the tuition is just, comparatively speaking, I was just looking up a state school's tuition, and beginning next fall we will be half of what in-state tuition is at that school. And so it's roughly about $3,000 for tuition. And the next program that I saw as far as private schools, the next cheapest program was $23,000 a year. Ours is $6,000 for that. So just an amazing financial blessing that the Board of Trustees from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has given BYU. So for fall of 2014, we're talking about almost 2/3 of our incoming students received full or half or partial tuition scholarships. So that's the first area of financial aid. tuition scholarship? Is there some type of tuition aid scholarships? And the answer is yes. 2/3 of our students get some type of scholarship there. So, and 53% of students were offered full or half tuition scholarships, and then 10 to 15 additional students. So the second piece is the RATA aspect, so a graduate assistantship. I think this year we're going to be around 18 of our 40 students are going to be offered some type of graduate assistantship. They're working with a professor on research, working with a professor to help us on a conference planning or a newsletter. There's lots of different opportunities. You can see there, typically 5 hours a week, $16 an hour, so you're looking at between $200 to $2,500 to do the RATA. And then this is that fourth aspect that I mentioned, but I want to bring that up right now. Charlene Clark, who's our department secretary, has done a wonderful job heading this up for us. But if you can see here, last year our students received, I think last year was, well, this year it's going to be over $100,000 in additional educational awards. So our students are required to do internships, and in addition to that, you can qualify for AmeriCorps if you meet certain criteria, and all but I think 2 of our students qualified for that. And you can see how much that is when you're looking at upwards of $3,500 additional money to complete an internship, being a part of AmeriCorps. So that's a great opportunity that our students have. The other piece that I didn't put on the slide is the college offers internship grant awards, and I think this year we had 10 or so students that got between $500 and $1,800 as part of an internship grant from the college. So as you taking that, 20,000 may not even be the cap. It may be above that, but just a wonderful opportunity for financial aid assistance at BYU. And then here's a piece that I just found incredibly insightful when I first came here, and now I know why. So we're the only social work program in the entire country to offer all paid internships to our graduate students. So you can see there, if you're making $10 an hour, we require 1,100 hours of internship. You're looking at about $11,000 that you're going to get as a student to complete your internship. And again, the only program in the country that offers that. And so as I've looked at other programs, you're looking at 5 to 10% of other programs, their students get paid internships. We're 90 to 95% are not. So this $11,000 is an incredible blessing, but it's because we have good students, and our agencies very much want these students that they're willing to pay them. So let me talk and conclude in this section with a little bit about the program. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but absolutely we are part of BYU, and we support the mission of Brigham Young University, who supports the mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And then midway through it says, by generating new knowledge and by educating and training students to use the appropriate knowledge, values, and skills of the social work profession to serve children and families within their environment and the context of their specific cultures. So that's the core elements of what we do at BYU and BYU Social Work. Our vision is to create future leaders in the social work profession who have great clinical and research skill sets. And so, I actually teach the last semester a leadership class, but one of the great blessings and sometimes burdens of being an MSW is you're expected to go and be a leader. If you're any good at what you do, you will be a supervisor, you will be a program manager, you will be helping others learn how to be good social workers as well. And so that's our goal, is to not only develop leaders for the profession, but for our communities and for the church as well. Okay, let me conclude with this aspect. One of the things about being part of an accrediting body, which ours is CSWE, is, and this goes back to whether you choose BYU's program or another program, in some ways it matters and in some ways it doesn't. Here's where it doesn't matter. All accredited social work programs in the country are required to teach 10 core competencies. And these are the competencies here. All of us are required to demonstrate that our students are getting competence in these areas. And so no matter what school, what program you choose in social work, we all are bound by this. So that's why, in some ways, it doesn't matter where you go to get your MSW. In another way, it does, because if you're taking into account, I want, to get some really good clinical skills, I want a financial aid package that is very good, then that's where it kind of comes in and says, yes, it matters a lot of where you go. The other thing I wanted to just mention with regard to the clinical piece is the importance of, we have, one of our requirements is a DSM class, and so all of our students are required to take that class. That's not the case in many social work programs. That's an elective, and we feel that that's very important to become a competent clinician, is to have an understanding of diagnostic and the DSM. So as you can see here, the different core competencies: identify as a social worker and conduct oneself accordingly. We have very specific ethics within social work that you are bound by, which goes to number 2. Apply social work ethical principles to guide professional practice. 3, apply clinical thinking to inform and communicate professional judgments. Engage diversity and difference and advance human rights and social and economic justice. Engage in research-informed practice. Apply knowledge of human behavior in the social environment. Engage in policy practice. Respond to the context that shape practice. And then engage, assess, intervene, and evaluate different levels, as we talked about. So one of the great things about social work are the competency in these 10 areas that you'll get as well. Now we have, if you get into the program, and even when you apply to the program, it's important to understand this next slide. So yes, we are a clinical program, but we have 2 emphases. They're not 2 tracks, they're 2 emphases. So if you look at the clinical practice, as you apply, you'll choose to apply into one of these 2 areas. And so, as you can see on this slide, 30 to 35 of our students, on average, choose the clinical practice side. So our goal there is to give you really good clinical training, clinical skills, so that you can be a great clinician, a great social worker in the field. Whereas we have a few students that want to go on and get a PhD. And that's where, anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 students a year are on that track. Now, they're very similar in one aspect, and they're a little bit different in another. So let me talk about how they're similar. They're similar in that all of our students are going to get good clinical training, whether you're clinical or whether you're research. They're similar in that all of our students are going to get good research training. We have 3 research courses that all students go through. But where the distinction comes is in the electives. So anywhere from 2 to 5 clinical electives, if you're going to go into the clinical practice area: crisis intervention, substance abuse, play therapy, school social work. We have a number of clinically focused electives that you'll take. Whereas if you're a research emphasis, we want you to take more advanced research skills, structural equation modeling, and courses like that, to prepare you to be a really good candidate for a top PhD program. That's one difference. The second difference is, in our research project, all of our students are required to do a publishable paper. The clinical students, they're not required to submit that for publication, whereas the research emphasis students, the quality is such that we want to get that paper published. So those are really the 2 distinctions, but they overlap a lot. And so, could you go on for a PhD in the clinical practice emphasis? Absolutely. Could you do really good clinical work if you were in the research emphasis? Absolutely. So we just want to give a couple little things in place as far as electives and the papers that kind of give you a little more of a push in that particular area. And then finally, the last slide is, just kind of a review of some of the things we've gone over. We're looking for future leaders in this program. We have a focus on clinical practice and research. And our curriculum focuses on these different systems that we talk about: families, individuals, couples, children, which we are, as you go through the program, you'll get exposure to those different areas. And then let me conclude with this. You must fulfill certain academic prerequisites. Nancy will cover a little bit more of this, but it is vital that you understand this piece. If you're going to be applying to the program, we have 3 prerequisites: introduction to social work, research methods, and statistics. All 3 of those must be completed prior to the application deadline. It's not worth applying to the program saying, oh, I will take those classes if I'm admitted or I'm currently enrolled in those classes. No, we need those classes, those prerequisites completed prior to you submitting your application. It's just, for us, is a great way. The introduction class helps students understand, is this what I really want to do as far as social work? And then we found that students that have not completed in the past the research or statistics prerequisite really struggle in the program. So, this is a good way for you to determine whether this is the right program for you. And those 3 classes will be good barometers to know whether you can be successful in this program. So if you have any questions, feel free to email us about the prerequisites or anything else. But hopefully this has been helpful in understanding what social work is about, in the BYU MSW program specifically, what we're about. And then I'll have Nancy come in and talk more specifically about the program and the application process. Thanks.